All right, everybody can see my screen and hear me. Let's assume that's a yes. We're recording and I'm sharing, right? Okay. So last time we were talking about MVC, this idea of the model view controller. So the remember anything with design patterns, that's this previous slide here. So we introduced this concept of something called the design pattern. And anything with a design pattern has a does not imply an implementation. It doesn't say how you should do something. It just kind of says, you know what, it's a good idea if you try to accomplish this end goal. So the design pattern we're looking at initially that we're going to see today how Android accomplishes this is this design pattern called MVC, the Model View Controller design pattern, which is a funky name for something that just says, look, if you're writing an application that has a graphic user interface, it has some logic that makes your application work, and then maybe it works with some data from somewhere. You know, if that's something you're working with, it's a good idea to keep those three pieces separate. That way you don't have, when you need to modify your user interface, you go to that portion of it, you start making changes to just user interface stuff. You don't have to worry about introducing bugs or something like that into your code. It also makes the things easier to read. So you don't have everything hodgepodge together. The example I used was in the early days of web development, when the first language specifically geared towards web development kind of came out, which was PHP. You know, initially people would write their web pages with their HTML, so that's their user interface stuff, and the PHP, the logic stuff, all mixed together inside of a single document. Now, maybe for simple websites, this isn't the end of the world, but the second your web page is starting getting more and more complex, and like now, I think I maybe use the example of like MSN or Yahoo.com or something like that. If you go to one of these major portals, even Concordia's portal, you know, the my.cuw.edu portal. Let's see a couple of chats. Well, who wouldn't like the honey badger? Just if you go to one of these sites like my.cuw.edu, there's a lot of crap going on that page. So you would imagine that under the hood, there's a whole bunch of user interface stuff. There's also a whole bunch of logic. And if all that was housed inside of a single document, that code would be pretty hard to manage. All right. So the concept is it's a good idea to keep those things separate. So as it gets more and more complex, your project is still maintainable. Okay. So for starters, we're going to start looking at MVC today. But before we do that, I'm going to introduce how do we get our Android projects into GitHub. So we'll start with that. All right. So everybody in here now, because our homework assignment today was to get a Hello World program working, right? Let me rearrange my stuff here. Okay, so you've already gone through. You have your, you know, you hit play. You have your device set up, and you have your Hello World application running here, like we did at the end of class last class. All right. Let's see, am I able to shrink this down a little bit so it fits? I'm going to spend exactly 15 seconds on it and see what happens. No, doesn't look like it. That's okay. It must just be my current resolution, because when I originally set it up, I was in, we were plugged into the HDMI in the classroom. Okay. So in any case, you have your running application. And now let's say that's you're done with your homework. I know for this homework assignment, you were just supposed to send me a screenshot of kind of this guy here, kind of proving to me that, hey, now I have a working Android implementation at my on my computer that I do my homework. So when I assign additional homework assignments, I know that you have the tools you need to do it. Okay. So that was the point of the assignment due today. Now, if we now want to, let's say for our next homework assignment, we want to ultimately submit our code to GitHub so we have a convenient way of turning in our homework. Before we were using Git desktop, right? We were using GitHub desktop and we were going through and we were, creating a new repository and all this stuff. And you could still do all that if you wanted to. But Android Studio has built into it the ability to work with GitHub. I'm going to show you how to do that. So let's assume that I'm ready to turn my homework in or something like that. And hopefully the stuff's in the same place since this is a new version of Android Studio to me. But I'm going to go to VCS up top. And I'm going to say import into version control. So first of all, you notice here that has some different things. So you can kind of see a competitor to GitHub. So you can say, share on Google Cloud source repositories. I haven't used that before, but it's like a competitor to GitHub, let's say. But for us, we want to share a project on GitHub. Okay, notice that we're not saying create a repository. Okay, above. Because remember, we kind of did two different things. There's two steps. GitHub is a cloud-based ecosystem that holds Git repositories. So we could create a local Git repository with our project here, no problem. We can just do that, and then we can keep it on our computer or put it on Dropbox or upload it someplace else manually if we wanted to, doesn't matter. All right, but if we share project on GitHub, if ultimately GitHub is our destination for our application, when we do share project on GitHub, it will create the Git repository for us and also get it up on GitHub. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. So I went into VCS, import into version control, then share project on GitHub. All right, and that's going to bring up this information. Now, when it first goes in here, it's going to, it might ask you for your username and password for GitHub, because I've used it before. So it seems like it brought in my settings from my previous thing. There might even be a thing where I can go into settings or something. But the first time you do this, you might have to put in your username and password for GitHub. All right, it's asking me for my repository name. I'm going to call this guy Hello World CSC250 Spring 2021. All right, now it has private turned off, so that's good by default. So I don't want my repositories to be private repositories. That way, and you don't want yours to be private either. That way I can see them when you submit your link. All right, it already has everything else set, so just click share. So give it a name, hit share. It should do something for a second. Invalid path to command line tool. So it said it couldn't run Git. So we need to fix our path to Git. So if you get this error, that means it could not find the executable file for Git. Let's, it's because I'm running a new version of the Mac OS since the last time I did this. So it wants me to install the command line tools on a Mac, which comes with git.com, or the executable for Git. So I'll just do that real quick. It might take some time, but that's okay. Everything I have pretty fast internet here, so I doubt it's going to take that long. But in any case, what I just showed you would have gotten it up to GitHub, easy peasy. So now we're down to 3 minutes on it. So we'll let it keep cooking, and once that's done, well, actually, it seems to be going way faster now. Let's just let it do its thing. But anyways, it would now be on GitHub. So I'll go ahead, and while that guy's cooking, I'll go over to github.com, and I'll go ahead and log in. All right, and then while we're at that, if you noticed, I put up on Slack this morning, Jonathan has, Yakimouse has announced that there's going to be a hackathon coming up for the computer science department through the Hackathon Club. And I'm going to require that for all of my students. I don't remember the exact date. Is it April 17th? It's a Saturday, I think. So if you're in one of my classes, which all of you are, you're required to do that hackathon. It's a 12-hour day, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. or something along those lines. If for some reason you can't do that, or you just don't want to do that, I will have an alternative assignment that won't be the most fun assignment, because remember, it's going to be replacing a 12-hour commitment. That'll be over that weekend. So if you do the hackathon, you won't have the over the weekend assignment. If you don't do the hackathon, you will. Pick your poison, but the better approach is going to be to do the hackathon, because it's a really good learning experience. Okay.
Question.
Go ahead.
What weekend is it?
I want to say it's April 17th. Does anybody have Slack open right now? I would switch to Slack on my computer here real quick, but since we're recording, I'm doing it on my phone. Sometimes
it is April.
Sometimes I forget to change what channels I'm on. So if I'm on one of my private faculty channels or something, I don't want that to be on the recording. Let's see. April 17th. It's a Saturday from 8:30 a.m. to 8:30 p.m.
Okay.
And that'll be in the computer science department. I assume it's there, not in the, well, just go on the Slack and look at the details. I don't know if it's going to be in the computer science department or over in the near the makerspace in the business school, but it'll be at Concordia. One way or another, it'll be at Concordia. Good experience. I'm going to make all my classes, including my grad classes, come to that. You know, we've kind of fallen off that a little bit over the last last year at least with COVID, but I think it's time to get back into that stuff. If you are not comfortable in a group setting, because I think they're trying to do it in person, I believe there will be options for online attendance to it, and we can kind of work with those groups. So I don't want anybody to be stretched outside of their comfort zone from a COVID perspective, but I do want you to participate. All right, so make sure you sign up with Jonathan as soon as possible. Follow the link that he gave you there on the on Slack, so we can get you in the system and know how many teams we're going to have and stuff like that, and then we'll figure out what accommodations need to be made. All right, any other questions about that?
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
What's the alternate assignment? Because I should be in nationals that weekend.
I don't know yet, but it'll be some homework assignment over that weekend that I'll probably give on Friday, and it'll be due the following Monday, and it'll be probably an extra big assignment.
Oh.
It's possible I can give it, you know, maybe to not be a jerk, I would give it a little bit earlier in the week. So since you're basically saying you're going to be gone that weekend, I can try to get it together earlier in that week, so you can work on it during the week, even though I'll have it due on Monday.
Okay. Thank you.
So we can work it out, but so, and I get it. I get that there are sometimes you just have other commitments and you can't make it. And this is, the punishment isn't targeted at those people. All right. I just want people to participate, and typically students don't. So I'm going to require it. I'll give you an alternative that you won't be happy with. But hey, you know, you do you, whatever that whatever makes sense for you. But certainly we can make accommodations for reasonable things. All right, so let me go back in here now. I'll go back to import into version control, share on GitHub. I'll do this again. Hello world, CSC250, spring 2021. Make sure private's not checked. Hit share. Oh, it must have finished doing it already on its own once it finished installing that thing. So that means I should be able to go back in here. Just refresh this. And we'll do hello. Yep, here we go. Hello world, CSC250, spring 2021. It's up here. Looks like it just created the repository. All right, so I have to do this a little backwards then. ultimately, we now need to push the updates, but that's not what I wanted to show you from the get-go. So let me get the thing that'll allow you to make changes. Well, actually, here, this would be the easiest way of doing it. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to delete this repository because what it did is it half created it the previous time. So I'll delete the repository it was created. So now it's as if it did not do that. So now I can come back in here and I can say import into version control, share project on here. Just get the M. Littman part off the front of it. All right, so that's the name of it. I'll hit share. And I believe it should now be able to create it. Okay, so this pops up and it says, hey, here's all the crap I'm going to be adding to your repository. It does it all for you because it's effectively, it knows there's this thing called a git ignore that I think if you remember when I first showed you GitHub through Git Desktop, we didn't do anything with it on there, but there's a little drop down that says, hey, I know all the certain files I should ignore when it comes to different types of programs. So like if you're doing game programming with Unity, there's a git ignore for Unity. That way, because when you launch your application in Unity for game development, it builds like multiple gigabytes of files dynamically. Well, that's not stuff that you want to store up in GitHub because the software application Unity will do that every single time it launches. It'll build those files for you given your source code. So it will ignore certain files. Okay, so the same thing is true here. Android Studio knows what things to not put up in GitHub because it will do its own Gradle build each time. All right, so just leave the settings the way it is. It selected all the crap it's going to upload. Leave that alone. Just hit add. Now what we've done is we've added that to our repository. And now it says successfully shared project on GitHub. And it gives you a little link you can click on to take you there. Otherwise, I can go back here and I should be able to refresh it. It should show up now.
I have a question. Well, when I try to log into GitHub from the Android emulator, I'm putting in the right username and password, but it's still not letting me log in.
Well, go and confirm it's the right username and password over on github.com.
Yeah, that's what
So I'm also having the same issue.
Say that again.
I'm also having the same problem he just said.
it says. Invalid authentication data 404 not found.
All right. Is anybody else having success with it? I wonder if there's something going on with it.
I have. So
I had the exact same. Oh, I had the exact same problem, but I fixed it. You have to do like there's like a GitHub token I had to use instead of actually signing in because I couldn't use like my email or anything. I had to create like a token. Which,
So with that from over on GitHub?
yeah. If you go to like your settings and then you go to developer settings, there's like a add token thing, and then you have to check like I think it's developer settings. And then personal access tokens. Then you just create generate new token. And then I had to, I don't know, like initially I didn't check any of the boxes below and it didn't work, so I just checked them all the next time and then it worked.
Yeah, see, I don't know why you would need to use a token. But I want to make sure this works for everybody in here because you got to keep in mind that my GitHub account is a much older GitHub account than yours, and it's possible that I'm grandfathered into some setting on this thing. All right, so you went under settings, developer settings, personal authentication or personal access tokens. Oh, it looks like I do have one. So I must have had to do this at some point. All right, so you went and said generate a new token. So you would just do like Android Studio or something like that. You would only need to do this once. And then you weren't sure what to click, so you just clicked everything. You said,
Yeah.
hey, I own this, so give me permission to all the crap that I might need permission to. Since we're not doing crazy GitHub stuff here, let's just select everything. There might have been a button that said select all, but whatever, I'm almost done, I think. All right. Then you'll click generate token. All right, so it gives me the token, so I can copy this now. And where did you have to put the token in?
When you sign in, like it's a GitHub on Android Studio, there's like an option on the top right that says like or login using token or something, and then you
Okay,
just like copy and
gotcha.
paste it.
So basically you copied this token here. That's like, hey, I already have my username and password. It's linked into this token or whatever. And then when you first launched, when you first did import into version control here and shared project on GitHub, when it asked you for your username and password, there was a tab or a button that said use a token instead.
Yep.
Right. And then you just pasted that code in there, hitting Control V or Command V if you're on a Mac. And then from there, it'll work every single time. You won't have to do that again, because at that point in time, you've linked your Android Studio to GitHub through this this token thing. I'm not sure when they did that, but clearly I had previously done that for whatever reason, unless maybe they converted it over the first time it happened, since I already had a link between mine. So, but seems easy enough. They're just not, instead of sending your credentials directly, username and password, it's linking it through this token. Although I am surprised that you can't still just log in with your username and password. I wonder if there's a setting in GitHub, maybe security.
It, from what I saw, it has to do with your two-step verification when you
Okay.
first make the account.
Gotcha. So do they require two-step verification now?
No, but if you have two-step verification enabled, then you need the token. That's just why everyone
Well,
tried
okay,
figuring this
so
out.
did anybody get it to work without the token if they didn't have two-step verification? Like, did somebody get this to work just using their usual normal username and password? And they happen to not have two-step authentication turned on? Or is two-step authentication turned on by default, so everybody needs to do this token thing now? Because I'm pretty positive I do not have two-step authentication turned on. Like, I'm very confident that that's true. I choose not to turn it on almost anything. Go to my profile. Oh, well, I guess for right now, let's just leave it at, make sure you can upload your project to GitHub. Either put your username and password in. If that doesn't work, go and create the token thing. And then it'll be linked to it. You won't have to do it again. All right. So what I'll actually have you do for next class is I'll even just put the homework up now, and then we'll just keep rolling. Upload your project to GitHub using the import to GitHub feature in Android Studio and submit the GitHub link. So similar to this previous assignment, this will make sure you can turn in your code moving forward. So get working what we just did here in class, but I'm going to keep going with some new stuff here. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to change something in our user interface. I'm going to do something just relatively quickly. I'm going to change, instead of it saying hello world, I'm going to make it change something else. So remember, we're looking at MVC here. So our logic is inside of our main activity.java file. Our interface is in activity main XML. All right. I'm going to go ahead and actually, I'm going to do a couple of things here. By default, in our activity main, it uses something called the constraint layout as the base container type for our interfaces. And you'll understand what this kind of means here in a few seconds. But the idea is that we have various containers, various views that our application lives in when we're designing the user interface. And there's always a top level container. Well, the default top level container they gave us here was this thing called a constraint view, which allows us to do things like this and have things show up in a certain part of the screen. So I'll go ahead and make that change here, and I'll relaunch my application. I think hello world should change to a new place. So now it's up there instead of centered on the screen. Now, this is all fine and dandy. If you want to leave it like this, you can. I'm not a user interface designer, and I don't want our focus in here to be on user interface design. The reason this constraint view is the top level thing, which is also the default on iOS development, is because now we have some different screen size devices. So you might say, look, I want this guy to be in the upper left-hand corner, roughly this distance from whatever the upper left-hand corner is of whatever device I'm on. So this will create those constraints. I am going to teach you a much simpler way of doing user interface stuff that will be less flexible. So if you end up getting really into user interface design and stuff like that with this, what we're looking at right now is the better tool, but I'm just going to keep things simple for us. So I'm going to come over here to our constraint layout. I'm going to right click and I'm going to say convert view. And what I'm going to do is I want to make this guy a linear layout. All right. So by default, looks like it made it a horizontal linear layout. So I'll go ahead and click on that. And then I'll scroll over on the top under attributes here. And I want to change it to vertical for right now. Oh, it actually it doesn't even have an orientation, but I'm going to choose vertical as the orientation. And what happens with a vertical orientation, I'll just show you real quick, is now the entire screen of our application is managed by, in this case, a single vertical linear layout. And what a vertical linear layout is it's like, think of it like a bucket. And anything you throw in there, it'll just stack on top of each other vertically. So I'll go ahead and throw some buttons in here. Throw them out here if I want. Sometimes it's easier to get it where you want it to be over here. Sometimes it's, you can just drop it out over here. Doesn't really matter. All right. So, it's stacking these guys on top of each other. If I want to make this button come before this thing up here, we can organize it over on this side, all that stuff. Similarly, I can also come in here to layouts and I can say, you know what, I also want to put a horizontal linear layout, maybe here at the bottom. And then I want to throw a couple of buttons into that horizontal linear layout. So you see how I put those buttons inside of this horizontal linear layout, and it gave me 3 buttons next to each other, then these buttons on top of each other, right? So we're going to be building our interfaces in terms of this kind of thing. It just makes life a little bit easier for us to kind of create quick and dirty user interfaces. If you want to explore beyond that, you can, but this class is not going to be about creating awesome user interfaces. You can go and learn that stuff on your own. We want to still focus on programming just in the context of this new tool. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to delete most of these things. And I'm going to go ahead and I have my text view there called Hello World. Now, one thing you notice here, it's only showing it in the upper left-hand corner, and it's only going as far as Hello World is. Notice here for Hello World, so I'm showing you some other common settings. When I click on this text view for Hello World, and I look at its attributes, it has this layout width and layout height. And the default right now is wrap content. So that means that right now I have the word Hello World in there. So its height and its width is going to be whatever height and width it needs to accommodate the Hello World string. Similarly, though, I can change its width to match the parent. The parent of this text view is the linear layout in which it lives. So if I say match parent for its width, now you see it goes all the way across. Now, the text is still left justified, right? So our text in there is still sitting there on the left-hand side, no harm, no foul. But now what I can do is I can make some changes. Let's say I want it to be centered in here. So first of all, I'm going to keep my text view set, and I'm going to come in, start scrolling down and looking at some other things. I'm going to change the text size so we can read it. So this is just like using Microsoft Word or something. I'll change it to a 36. So now it's a little bit bigger. All right. We also have the ability for, let's see if I can find it in here, but I'm actually going to do it a different way. You do have your normal stuff just for like in Microsoft Word. I can make this guy bold. I can make it italics, whatever. Let's see. Font family. I would have thought it would have been up here. It's kind of good that it's not, maybe. Oh, I've never actually messed with that. It's kind of cool. Interesting. Let's see if I can get that back. Yeah, the interface builder for Android has evolved greatly since the early days. So there's all sorts of stuff in here you can do that I've never messed with. So again, we're not focusing on user interface stuff in here, so that's okay. Somewhere in here, there's probably a thing for you to like set this guy to have the font centered, but it's actually not the way I'm going to show you to do it, because text views do have the ability to treat this like text, like you would in Microsoft Word. But I want us to think of everything generically. And what I mean by that is if I go to this text view and I come down, so by default, they have these common attributes that are associated with our, oh, maybe it's this texting here. Does that change it? No. Well, in any case, I wouldn't have used the center button wherever it is in here. Instead, I'm going to come all the way down here and I'm going to look at something that's generic. This is almost like thinking about things from the perspective of like a string is at some level still a generic object. So for us, a text view at the end of the day is still a view. A linear layout is still a view. So our top level thing that governs all of the things that we see on the screen is something called a view. And views have something called gravity. Okay, so here's the gravity setting. And so the way gravity works is if you think of let's think about from linear layouts perspective for gravity first. So if I think of gravity here as being like our classroom, and by default, everything is sucked up to the top. Okay, that's the default setting for gravity. If I go ahead and I go down to gravity here, but now I'm on gravity for our linear layout, And I go ahead and say, so you can almost think of like you're in space. And I change the gravity for this room, this linear layout to bottom, everything will drop to the bottom. We've turned on the gravity in the room, and now everything's on the bottom. Similarly, I can set the gravity to center, but notice here, it says center, but this thing didn't center. Why didn't it center? Because it's currently set up to match the width of the container it's in. Remember, we changed it earlier to, instead of wrap content, we had it match parent. So now if we change it to wrap content, it sucks to the middle, because now our text view container is something that's living in this larger container, the linear layout, that has the gravity set at the bottom and centered. Make some sense? So that's how gravity works in any of these views. So in any view, you can set its gravity, and that will help you control where things kind of appear on the screen. If we want it centered in the entire thing, so like the default app here that had the constraint view and everything centered within that within the whole view, we can say we want the thing to be centered, period. So this is centered horizontally and centered vertically. We can also choose to just center it horizontally. Except I click horizontally. Where's my center horizontally? We can choose to center it horizontally. We can then also tell it to center vertically. So those two together equal just centering it. Fill vertically. Now we'll say whatever you have should fill all the way down, whatever. So you can play around with some of those different things. But this also works. So if I go back here and I choose my width again to be match parent. So I'm on my text view right now. The width is match parent. So this entire thing goes all the way across. So this whole thing is a text view, and its width is relative to the width of its parent, which is this linear layout. But let's say I want to keep its width match parent, but I still want the text to be centered. Well, I can click on the text view. I can go down to its gravity, because a text view is still a view. And I can set it to be centered. And now the text. So now we have this little tiny room that has some text in it, and I turn the gravity to center for that room, and everything sucked to the center. All right, that makes sense? So effectively, what I just showed you there is kind of the bread and butter of how we're going to build all of our user interfaces, every one of them in our application. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and also change the text in this guy. So I'll click on my text view. I'll scroll up somewhere in here. We have our text. Eventually, was this guy the one that would have let me center it? Oh, doesn't look like it. Whatever. So I'll change this guy to woot, like that. So now I have different text, and we can see if I go ahead and run this. One cool thing you can do here, I can stop the application that's currently running by hitting the red box here, or I can do this little restart thing here, which says run the app. So there's two different versions of this. One is run the app and apply changes that you've made that restart the activity. This one just says run the app. I guess maybe does that stop it and rerun it? It looks like it might have. So I think this left-hand one is equivalent to clicking this and then clicking the play button. This guy here, when you make changes, it just relaunches the activity. It doesn't actually relaunch your whole application. So it's like a quick launch way of doing it. So there's my woot. If I change this guy now to LOL, let's say, and then I do this quick launch version, it should have changed much more quickly, because it didn't actually have to reinstall and relaunch the application. It kind of did like a quick restart of the application. All right, so just kind of some shortcuts you can do with that. But we've made some changes to our application now. All right, so now I think this is our Git stuff, right? So over here on the right, now that this guy is managed by GitHub, I can go ahead and I can commit changes. Let's see what else we have. I can roll back to a previous version. I'm thinking that update project probably commits and pushes. So I'm going to click on this blue. Let's say we're done with our homework here. And I'm going to go ahead and click on the blue thing. Oh, no, that's not the one. So I'm going to click on the green arrow. That's going to say commit changes. All right, so it's going to say, hey, here's the crap you've changed here, right? I've made some changes to my activity name, yada, 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 whatever. Now down here, I can choose to just commit it, or I can hit the little arrow and I can say commit and push. And it wants me to put a commit message in here, so made update. So I'll go ahead and say commit and push. And then it's saying, hey, I've done some code analysis stuff. Here's some warnings, yada, yada, yada. Just ignore that stuff. Sometimes they want you to flag a couple things. You can hit review if you want, but otherwise I'm going to say, look, this is what I want to do. I want to commit and push this to the cloud. So I'll do commit and push, pops this up and says, this is what we're going to do. Go ahead and hit push. Now it's updated by project inside of the cloud. If I go back over to GitHub, get back to that application. So I kind of expected it to be like 2 clicks back, but we're already down the rabbit hole. So I'll refresh here. And notice here now it sees that I've made an update. If I go into my app, then I go into my source. I go into main. I go into my resource file. I go into my layout. Here's my activity main where there was a change made. And now, this is the XML file for it, but we see now it shows the LOL is in there. All right, so that's how we can make changes to our application and then ultimately get those changes uploaded to GitHub. All right, now the next thing that I'll show you related to GitHub, since we just have a few minutes left here, this is something that will become handy when we start doing larger things and you want to kind of like in the ideal world, you will have your version of your assignments, since we typically have things build on top of other things, and you'll keep updating your version. But let's assume that you get to a position where your version is so broken that you're like, okay, it's going to take too long to fix this. I already have a working starting point that I did in class, and you want to get that working inside for you. Now, one thing that can happen here, this is the common mistake that people will make. They'll go to, I give you the link to my GitHub project, something like this. You come here, and then what you end up doing is somewhere there's going to be like a download button or something like that on yours. Since I own this, it might not actually here it'll be this guy. So I can say I want to download the zip, something like that, or I can say open and get desktop. The thing is that if I do this, download and zip, or I say open and get desktop, I'll go ahead and do that. I'll say open and get desktop. So it's going to go ahead and open get desktop for me. This is the repository I'm going to clone. So I'll actually just do this. And I'm putting it inside of my repos. So this is as if you were me. So if you came to my repository that I gave you the link to, and you went ahead and cloned it in Git, your using Git desktop, you now will have this project. All right. Now the problem is, if you go and make changes to it, then you use that as your starting point. You launch it, everything's working. You make changes, and then you want to go and put that back into GitHub. It's not going to let you, because you didn't make changes to a project that you own. You made changes to my project. What you actually want is a copy of my project. You want a GitHub You want a Git repository that you own instead of a copy of a Git repository that I own. And the way you accomplish that, and I'm going to show you, I'll have to go to somebody else's thing on here. So let's just do a search for Android here. Let's see if we can find somebody else's Android project. Does this show me other people's or just mine? That's just mine. Let's go to Explore. Android app. Yeah, fine. Here, this is an Android application, actually written in Kotlin, so don't worry about that. But this would be me sitting in your shoes, and I came to, so I got in here and I went to, I went to Dr. Lippman's GitHub repo, and I want this to be my new starting point. What you do is you come up here and you click fork. What this will do is it will make a copy of the current repo, but that you own. So I'll go ahead and choose M. Lippman here. All right, so now I own this version of this repository. From there, I can, I think I can actually go up here and click on that URL there. And I can even open it from within. I think I can go to File. Do it all from Open? No, there's a way to open from a Git repository. Here, maybe it's in here. New import project. Oh, here, project from version control. And I can go ahead and just give it that URL. And I can hit clone. And what this will do is it will open up that project locally for me. So this would be what you would do when you wanted to use mine as your starting point. And it's currently working. And now this is my version. So I'll go ahead and say, when you open a project, you can either have it take over your current window or you can have it be a new window. So I'll just choose new window for right now. So here's this DuckDuckGo Android project that presumably I'm pretending like I own or whatever. But now when I make changes to this, I will now be able to push those changes like we did before, because I'm updating them on my repository, not the one that I'm copied from. All right. So whenever you're going to use somebody else's project as a starting point, you need to fork it first so that you get your own copy that you own. All right. Questions, comments, concerns, bribes. Homework for next class is just take what you had due for today, your Hello World thing, and get it uploaded to GitHub and submit a link as the solution to that homework. That way I know you have GitHub working. Next time, we're going to start looking at MVC from the perspective of how do I change the output on a label while the program's running, using code, having code talk to your labels, having being able to switch to different screens, having buttons that work, stuff like that. All right.
I have one question, Dr. Lewin.
Sure, go ahead.
So can you write the Android Studio interface in XML code rather than like how you were showing us?
Yeah, if you're asking, can I shut this window? I think that'll take me back to my other one. So rather than using the drag and drop thing, can you write it just in pure XML?
Right, I was just wondering if you could.
Yeah, absolutely, because that's what actually is happening. So right now, when I look at this guy, it's showing me this, this what you see is what you get thing, but I can just look at it purely code, or I can look at it as split view. So now if I change this guy to say something else, so I can come in here and now change this to Woot, and this will match up. So this little interface thing, we drag stuff in, it's just automatically writing XML for you. At the end of the day, it is XML that's being written behind the scenes. I would say you probably don't want to do this by hand, but sometimes it is helpful to be able to come in here and maybe move things around manually, because sometimes the interface builder thing makes it a little clunky if you need to get, you know, like a text view inside of a linear layout that is inside of another linear layout that's inside of another linear layout. Sometimes it's hard to get it to drop into the right place, and coming into the code view helps you, you know, kind of just paste it in where you want it to be. Make some sense?
Yeah.
All right, I will see. Well, let me just look at this last chat comment just in case there's something. Oh, somebody said the token thing. So I will see everybody on Wednesday.